Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to talk about Thoma, the newest character in Genshin Impact. Despite him being new, I already noticed a lot of misinformation floating around, a lot of wrong artifact sets, builds, and stuff. And so I want to clear out the best way to play Thoma, give you guys the best Thoma build, talk about everything you need to know, different ways to play him in this video. With that being said, as always, I want you guys to know that I stream most nights on Twitch. Link in the description if you are interested. And without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so I want to start things off by talking about his abilities and how to play him, and then I'll get into a bit more advanced things right after. As you guys know, Thoma is a pyro shielder. His elemental skill and his burst can be used together to have a pretty decent shield that has a few interesting properties. Regarding its scaling, it scales off of your max HP, and this obviously increases with your level, and there are a few things you need to know about this shield. Basically, you want to be using your skill first and then your burst to reinforce the shield. The reason for that is because when you use your burst, it creates another shield, another blazing barrier, and this barrier will actually stack on top of your skill, increasing your shield strength. In fact, when you look at your elemental skill, when you press it, it will deal some AoE pyro damage. It'll also generate 3 to 4 particles, so giving you some energy, and then it'll make a shield that will absorb pyro efficiently and also just scale on your HP, as I mentioned previously. However, when you make a new barrier, when you use your skill again, or especially when you use your burst, the remaining damage absorption of the current barrier will stack, and then the duration will be refreshed. Because of that, when you use your skill and then use your burst and normal attack inside of your burst, you will get a much stronger shield. In fact, what your burst does is it starts by doing 1 hit of pyro damage, and then it'll apply a sort of similar effect to Xingqiu's Rain Swords, but a pyro version, on the normal attack of whatever character is active. So it doesn't have to be Thoma. Any character that's auto-attacking will be shooting out some pyro damage that also summons a barrier, which will therefore reinforce your shield since it does stack and refresh the duration. And it's also worth mentioning that this passive talent will also increase your shield strength whenever you refresh your blazing barrier. So every time you're getting a new shield, and you can generate quite a lot of them, you will increase your shield strength as well. Now this leads to 2 main questions. Number 1, how good is Thoma's damage? And number 2, how good is his shield? Well, damage wise, his numbers scale off his attack, whereas his shield scales off his HP. Now there is an exception. You do gain some damage on your burst based off your max HP, but generally speaking, it does scale off his attack, whereas your shield is HP. Because of that, if you want to have a strong shield, you're going to be sacrificing some of your damage, and if you want to build damage, you're sacrificing your shield, although even if you do stack damage on Thoma, it's really not that high, especially compared to like Xingqiu or Xiangling or other characters, other off-field carries, which is why I believe Thoma's optimal role is as a shielder, where you're building HP on him and energy recharge, using him mainly for his shield and his pyro. Now there are a couple of reasons why I recommend this. Number 1 is that his burst has a very high energy cost. 80 energy cost burst with an elemental skill that has a 15-second cooldown, only generating 3 to 4 particles, makes it very difficult to spam your burst on cooldown, meaning you need a lot of energy recharge, which therefore won't allow you to build as much damage. On top of that, even if you do stack damage on him, the numbers he deals, his scalings, like as you guys can see, are really not that high compared to other characters. His fiery collapse, which is what you do on every normal attack, is only 87%, whereas other off-field supports or carries like Xingqiu, Beidou, Xiangling will all have much higher scalings than Thoma's. To elaborate even more on why I believe Thoma's more of a shielder than a damage dealer, he also has the problem of having an annoying internal cooldown. In fact, as you guys can see, the rate of pyro application on his burst is not amazing, to where you will not be vaporizing every hit you do. You won't apply pyro on every hit. The ICD is too long, to where, as you guys can see, you'll only be vaporizing every few hits, making it definitely a downside. Alright, so while I made it clear that I recommend using Thoma as a shield bot, I'm going to show you what he looks like damage-wise to show you why I don't recommend it. So I'm running him on very low HP just to maximize his damage by going Pyro Goblet, Crit, and Energy Recharge so I can actually get my burst with a Staff of Homa and really good stats. Alright, so to show you, I'm going to just vaporize Thoma's attacks, and you'll see that the damage it deals is not worth losing the shield or your energy recharge. Like, look, I'm doing 4,000s on every crit, or 7,500 on every crit, and vaporize, and also he has an ICD that makes me not able to vaporize every hit, so yeah, not great. And now regarding Thoma's shield strength, everyone always asks to compare Thoma with Diona with Zhongli, and the main question on everyone's mind is how good is Thoma's shield? The one thing I want to say is that, first of all, that's not the metric of a good character. Even if your shield is weaker than another's, you can outshine them in certain situations. When you're picking a shield character, it's usually, yes, having a good shield is nice, but also what else do they offer? For example, the reason why cryo teams will pick Diona over Zhongli is because Diona will give you more utility, more cryo particles, energy, even if her shield is weaker than Zhongli's. That being said, how good is Thoma's shield? Well, I'll put some numbers on screen, kind of giving you a visual representation, but something very important about Thoma's shield is that it's better in sustained situations where you're auto-attacking constantly, keeping the shield up nice and healthy, but it's not as good as like a panic shield. If you use it right before you get hit, it'll be very weak. So while Thoma's shield overall isn't like the strongest one, although as you guys can see, it can be pretty good, he isn't as good as just a pure shielder as someone like Zhongli, or arguably even as Diona, because while his shield can be stronger, Diona will also give you like healing, whereas Thoma's advantage is having that shield, which will will be strong enough while also providing you with the other parts of his kit, mainly the pyro application that will make you pick Thoma over other characters in like a Shoutout team, for example, that we'll talk about later. Also, another piece of bonus information that I forgot to mention that I want to add is that his burst does last for 15 seconds out of the 20-second cooldown. So while the cooldown's kind of long, the duration of it is very long as well, which is really nice. The only downside is obviously the 80 energy cost that it has. Lastly, regarding Thoma's talent priority, it actually depends what you're looking for. To maximize your shield, leveling your E actually will scale higher, will give you a stronger shield, whereas your burst also increases your shield's damage absorption by a little bit, but also increases your damage. Therefore, it can depend what you're going for. For a pure shield build, your skill is what you want to focus on and max this first. But if you want to build damage and you want your Thoma to deal more, you can max your burst first, with both of these being pretty good upgrades. Okay, so now for arguably the most important section, Thoma's artifacts. I'm going to get straight to the point and think that a lot of people aren't building Thoma properly, so I'm going to tell you guys the optimal way to build Thoma. Now, this does depend on your playstyle. I made it very clear that Thoma, in my opinion, is more of a shielder than a damage dealer, but if you want to make Thoma your carry, if you want Thoma to build damage, that's fine, and I will cover that. But in terms of optimal playstyle, number one, you need enough energy recharge to spam your burst when it's on cooldown to strengthen your shield and deal damage, and you also need enough HP for your shields to be tanky so that they don't die in one hit. Because of that, the way I recommend you build Thoma is by first of all getting enough energy recharge to spam your burst on cooldown. While this highly depends on you, your team comp, playstyle, rotation, all that, I believe Thoma needs a really high amount of energy recharge because your skill has such a long cooldown and your burst has an 80 energy cost to where you really need a lot of ER. As someone who usually gets away with low energy recharge on like every character, I honestly recommend like 200 to 220 for Thoma. Now this can be higher or lower. For example, if you have your 4th constellation, it's a lot lower, and you can also use something like Favonius Lance to give you some particles, but typically I honestly recommend that much ER, like 200 or more, to be able to get your burst back on cooldown. For your other stats, while your damage will increase with attack and crit, your shields do scale off HP, which is why for a general shield build, right, when you want to make them a shield bot, you should go for HP on the goblet, HP on the circlet, and then on your sands, energy recharge if you need it, and if you somehow have enough energy recharge on your substats, then you can also go for HP on the sands. I do also want to add though that you can run a crit rate circlet if you're running a Favonius Lance, if you don't already have enough crit rate to reliably proc the weapon's passive, but we will get into the weapons a bit later in the video. Now with that being said, while as I said, I do recommend a shield Thoma, if you want to max his damage, obviously Pyro Goblet and crit will give you more damage, but that is not what I recommend you build on Thoma. Now for Thoma's specific artifact sets, there's a few pretty good options. I really like Noblesse Oblige because I think that as a support, as a shielder, you would rather buff your whole party's damage, give all your party members that 20% attack for 12 seconds, instead of just buffing your own Thoma's damage. On top of that, the 2-piece set of Noblesse will give you 20% burst damage, making this, in my opinion, his most general artifact set. While I see almost everyone else recommend Emblem, I honestly believe if you don't have a Noblesse user, giving that to Thoma can be optimal. That being said, Emblem can be a good option, like the 2-piece gives you 20% ER, and you can actually pair the 2-piece Emblem with 2-piece Millilith that also gives you 20% HP for a build that just gives you more, tanky shields and energy recharge. 4 Emblem is okay and can be the best set if you're trying to deal damage, but again, as I mentioned, buffing your team is usually better than buffing your Thoma because giving attack with Noblesse to your whole party is usually more damage overall than just buffing your Thoma's burst. Lastly, I do want to mention, and this is a set that I've heard literally nobody talk about, is that there's actually a 4-star set that you might not think of that can actually be really good when you are running Thoma as a support in a reaction team. Now, the downside of this is that it is a 4-star set, so the substats will be worse and you might not want to level it. However, if you're running an offset sands and you do run a 4-piece instructor on Thoma, I do believe that it can be very good offensively because it will give you 120 elemental mastery when you trigger a reaction, and all you have to do for that is swap into Thoma, do 1 auto attack with your burst, and then you will buff your Shoutout's damage significantly. This is not the set that I recommend to everyone though, because your shield will be weaker since they're 4-star artifacts, unless you do like min-max your instructor pieces, but it is more of a niche artifact set, although I do think it can be really good in Thoma's best team, which is where you pair him with Shoutout. That being said, for a more general build, I do recommend the artifacts I mentioned earlier, like the 4-piece Noblesse. Alright, so now I want to take some time to talk about Thoma's weapons, which is a pretty important section because there's a lot of different weapons that will be good for you depending on how you play Thoma. Generally though, I really like Favonius Lance because it's a weapon that not only offers you a high base attack, but especially gives you a ton of energy, which is really important for someone like Thoma who has a high cost energy burst. This weapon will give you energy recharge on its stat and also on its effect every single time you crit, and this is a weapon that gets a lot better with refinement as well. This is therefore the general spear that I recommend the most, although you do have to keep in mind that you want crit rate on this weapon. It is like its main downside. You do want some crit rate on your substats, maybe on a circlet, so that you can proc this effect on cooldown because it is a very good one. Now that being said, there's a lot of other weapons that shine in specific playstyles. First of all, for a shield build, while a lot of people talk about Black Tassel, it's okay. It's definitely viable because it gives you HP. I really don't recommend it over energy recharge weapons because the base attack is terrible and the HP stat, while it will increase your shield strength, since Thoma needs so much energy recharge, I would rather recommend an energy recharge weapon. And then if you have enough, you can get more HP on your artifact, on your sands or whatever, because something like Favonius will give you much more utility than like a Black Tassel. On the contrary, if you're playing the other type of Thoma, where you're just trying to maximize his damage, something like the Catch that gives you a lot of energy recharge, but also burst damage and burst crit rate can honestly be pretty good because the energy recharge is always useful. And so this can be just a good weapon, right? It gives you damage, energy recharge, and you can still build Thoma for a more shield build while also getting the energy recharge and the damage that this weapon provides you. Other good weapons include the Skyward Spine, which is a 5-star, and also Staff of Homa can be good as well. Although I do feel like it's kind of a waste on Thoma because like I would much rather run this on Hu Tao or Shao if I have it, but it is good. High base attack, amazing crit damage, and gives you HP, making your shield even stronger, and then attack based on your HP. So obviously this weapon is good for him. I just wouldn't recommend pulling for Homa for Thoma specifically, since he is mainly like a shield support, and it would be better used, in my opinion, on Hu Tao. I also wanted to mention that Engulfing Lightning, which is a weapon I don't have, is actually really good because it gives you a ton of energy recharge, both on the stat and the effect also gives you some ER, right? 55% at level 90 plus 30% when you use your burst, making it very, very good. However, most people that pulled for Engulfing are using it on Raiden or another character, but if you do have it, it can be good for Thoma. And so overall, Thoma has a lot of good options, with my personal recommendation being energy recharge polearms like Favonius. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's now talk about Thoma's constellations. Thoma actually has some really good constellations, but in general, like, he is someone who can get away just fine with C0, and I say this because he fills his role as a shielder and a pyro applier in like a Hu Tao team pretty well at C0. That being said, he does have some key constellations that can make him a lot better. For example, his 4th constellation that will give you a bunch of energy, 15 energy when you use your burst, which is amazing because that reduces the 80 energy cost to effectively 65 because you're getting 15 back. Other than just your C4 though, your other constellations are pretty nice. When another character in your party is shielded and gets attacked, your cooldown will be decreased, your skill and your burst, both their cooldowns will go down by 3 seconds, and you can proc this once every 20 seconds. So this is just a pretty convenient constellation for that. Your C2 increases your burst duration by 3 seconds, making it effectively 18 out of the 20 seconds, giving it even less downtime. 3 and 5 both will increase your damage, which isn't that big of a deal. And then your C6 is honestly pretty nice. This will increase the damage of all your party members' normal, charged, and plunge attacks by 15% for 6 seconds whenever you obtain or refresh a shield. This is therefore really nice in team comps where obviously your main DPS is auto attacking or charge attacking. So for example, in a Hu Tao team who is constantly spamming normal and charge attacks, this is a really good constellation that will buff your Hu Tao basically non-stop because you can refresh that blazing barrier pretty easily. Because of that, I think Thoma honestly has some really good constellations, notably 4 and 6, but I don't think he's a character that depends on them. He's fine at C0, although your C4 will greatly decrease the amount of energy recharge that you need, making him a lot easier to build. Now, I believe that something that I have to cover is covering Thoma's potential as a character, and by doing that, I'm actually going to get into the team section. The reason for that is because there's one team comp where Thoma is optimal in. He is one of the meta teams for this character and where I can recommend him the most. That is in a Hu Tao team. Now, while I touched on this briefly in my last video, the reason why Thoma and Hu Tao are so good together is because Hu Tao and Thoma have a lot of good synergy together. First of all, what this team comp does is allow your Thoma to apply pyro on enemies at the start of your rotation, allowing you to then swap into an Nemo character like Kazuha or like Sucrose, and then proc the Viridescent Venom effect, which will greatly increase your damage. Like, this set is absolutely amazing, and it'll also buff your team through the passive ability of Kazuha or Sucrose when they do swirl pyro. And in case you're wondering, the reason why Hu Tao can't really apply pyro herself at the start of a rotation is because the only way for her to apply pyro is inside of her elemental skill, which has a very long cooldown, to where you want to have a support who's pyro that can set it up in this type of team. And so by running an Anemo unit like Kazuha or Sucrose paired with Thoma, this can amplify your Hu Tao's damage, making it one of her best teams and the main place where I'd recommend using Thoma, which is very fitting since Thoma and Hu Tao are on the same banner. And on top of that, Hu Tao in general as a character is someone who likes having a shield, especially at C0. If you can't spam your charge attacks without using all your stamina, you want to be able to have a shield so that you can use all of your stamina to charge attack and not have to spend too much dodging. I also wanted to mention that in this team, you want to be usually doing one normal attack into a charge attack on Hu Tao to ensure that your Thoma is not stealing any of your vaporizes, and typically this team works really well if you do that. So in case you guys are wondering just how much damage my Kazuha or swirling pyro will actually buff my Hu Tao by, let me show it off. So if I were to just apply Hydro on this enemy, and then I use a Hu Tao charge attack, right? Here's how much it does. Wait, well, let me actually get it. Yeah, 42,400. Okay, so I did 42,000 there on a vaporize. Now, if on the other hand, I swirl Pyro, so, you know, I apply Pyro on my Thoma, whatever, then I swirl it, and then I use my Rain Swords. I apply Hydro on the enemy, and now I do a charge attack. Look how much more I'm going to deal. Boom, 65,000, okay? And that increase in damage is absolutely massive to where running another Pyro character so that you can do that, so that at the start of your rotation, you can apply Pyro and then swirl it, is, in my opinion, very worth it for Hu Tao. And Thoma also gives you a shield that is very nice. Now, regarding the other teams you can pair Thoma with, there's not that many, honestly. There's a few where you can use him as a viable option without him being the best, so that's kind of what I want to cover. There's mono Pyro teams where he can work, where you pair him with Kazuha, Bennett, Xiangling, for example, or even Venti. You can mix and match a lot of Pyro units there. Thoma's not the best option because his damage isn't that high, but he is viable. Same thing if you pair Yoimiya in a mono Pyro team, someone like Thoma can work as well. I've also tested Thoma as a replacement for Bennett in the Raiden national team, where you're typically running Raiden, Xiangling, Xingqiu, and Bennett. And while it can work, like I managed to full clear Abyss with it, I would obviously much rather use Bennett in that team, as he would provide you with a lot more damage and healing. Lastly, regarding Child and Thoma, since everyone always asks about this, on paper it looks like they work, but the main reason why the synergy between these two characters is not amazing is because of the internal cooldowns and the rate at which they apply their elements. So while Child applies Hydro very fast, Thoma applies Pyro not that fast, which means he doesn't apply it fast enough for your Child to vaporize, and so your Thoma is going to be the one vaporizing. However, since Thoma's damage isn't amazing, vaporizing Thoma's damage won't be nearly as much as if you were to run Xiangling in that team and vaporize Xiangling's damage instead. Now, I have seen some team comps where you run a ton of Pyro with Child to try to get your Child to vape, but overall, I don't really like this team too much. I know a lot of people want to play Child and Thoma because they're like aesthetically pleasing or whatever, and they look like they should go together, like their kits kind of make sense. From a meta perspective, it's basically never worth using Thoma over Xiangling here because the damage won't even be similar. That being said, if you want to play it for fun, go ahead, but it's not something I can recommend from a meta perspective, as obviously a Child, Xiangling, Kazuha, Bennett team will outperform it. So yeah, overall, I'd say his biggest weakness is actually the fact that his teams aren't that flexible, but he does have that one meta team that he fits in, which is why I believe it's really nice that he's on the Hu Tao banner, giving him a niche role that he does fill quite well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I tried to go into as much detail as possible, but keeping this a pretty short guide because Thoma's a pretty straightforward character. If there's anything I want to add, it will be in a pinned comment, so be sure to check that out. And yeah, so that's about it. I just finished all my midterms, so hopefully I will be streaming even more than before. And so I do want to say that if you're new, be sure to follow me on Twitch, sub if you want to catch new videos, and if this vid helped you out, feel free to join the Discord and all that stuff. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.